Hello, this is Gonzalo Lira speaking to you live, and this is the Roundtable number 32, and I am joined by Garland Nixon. Garland, how's it going? Good to see you.
Fantastic. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Garland and I, we've been on the same shows, right? But it's like two ships passing in the night. We've never run into each other. And the other day, just a couple of days ago, you were listening to the broadcast when I had on Larry Johnson, and you were commenting away and stuff like that. And that's how we finally hooked up. And so it's a real pleasure to have you on. Thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoy your stuff. I watch all of your stuff, so I really enjoy it. So I'm
See,
already part
chat.
of the community.
See, chat. See, only the best people. Yeah. I don't know why the best people listen to me. They shouldn't, or maybe they're just like slumming it when they watch my show. But anyway, it's a real pleasure. So we were talking before the broadcast about Dark Brandon, the Dark Brandon meme. And so we might as well just keep on going with American
Yeah.
politics, did you see snippets of the Fetterman debate?
No. I didn't. Oh,
Oh,
I
my
didn't
man,
watch
you missed out on some El Primo, scintillating conversation. It was like two rapier wit men like flashing at each other. It was so embarrassing.
I couldn't punish myself like that. I knew, it would be like I don't know, a Biden debate with anybody. With anybody. Although with Biden, I think if you remember a while back, was it Clint Eastwood did the empty chair? That's the
Yeah,
Biden
that,
debate
that
I
was
want to see.
sad.
Biden with
That
the
was
empty chair. The chair
yeah.
would win. The chair
No,
would
but
surely win.
Garland, I'm so sorry to say, and even though this is the first time that we've interacted, I have to say that you're weak. You are weak because you didn't have what it takes to stare at the TV and feel your neurons falling out of your ears like I did, man. It was unbelievable. I mean, it wasn't that Oz did such a great job. He was just, he's a TV personality, so he knows how to play the game. But the man was clearly incapacitated. And immediately after, what I found just despicable was all of the media were just gaslighting. It was just open gaslighting. And so I have to ask you, I mean, I'm not in the States, you are. Are people buying into all this bullshit?
What's interesting about this is that's American politics now. There is no substance to it. I've been commenting lately about how a lefty like me and a conservative like you. I have like a lot of friends and people who are like MAGA right wingers. I'm a left winger, but how we seem and I hear this from a lot of my lefty friends, right? Wow, it seems like I can have a more reasonable discussion with the conservatives and right wingers and the MAGA people than I can with these crazy liberals, right?
Mm.
And it's what we're looking at now is people who want to have a discussion based on facts, based on, you know what I mean? We can agree on certain things are factual, and therefore we can have a discussion about that, right?
Yeah.
And another group that lives in the world of narratives. You just create a narrative. You've probably heard the old comment about psychology. Neurotics create castles in the sky and psychotics live in them. These are
Yeah,
the people who live
that's
in
a good
those
saying.
castles. And people like us are sitting here saying, we have our ideological differences, and sure enough, but we understand that's a castle in the sky. It ain't real. And
Yeah.
so I think there's certain people just sitting around with their mouth open saying, I cannot believe what I'm seeing, whether it's foreign policy, whether it's domestic policy. And we see now that politics are and positions are nothing but tools. I'll claim I stand for whatever it is, let's say human rights, but I
Mhm.
apply the standards for human rights arbitrarily. If you're an enemy as opposed to an ally, and that's just permeates American politics now. So there's no level that you don't go to where there's a discussion about a narrative. So it doesn't really matter to the people who are supporting whoever, any given but Fetterman, whoever. It doesn't matter if this person is competent, if they're knowledgeable. Look, any idiot can listen to a narrative and parrot the narrative. You don't have to have any level of intellect or competency to do that. And that's where we are now.
Mm. Yeah, because it's the thing that has gotten me into trouble is, I'm here in Ukraine and I'm telling people how things are from my perspective and from readily available sources, many of them Western sources. And people just simply refuse to believe it. And they have these bizarre notions that are so detached from reality. And so, see, in my own case, I say to myself, if they believe nonsense, so what? Live and let live. But when it comes to actual policy which actually affects people's lives, which potentially could lead to some sort of military catastrophe, perhaps even nuclear war, because we really are dancing on the edge of a nuclear war here, based on misinformation, based on lies, based on an inability to look at reality as it is. And we're already seeing how, like Europe, for instance, is collapsing economically. The United States is not that far behind, and nobody is trying to fix that. Nobody's even admitting to the reality of it. And that's what has me so deeply disturbed. And it's refreshing to be able to talk to other people who see reality as I do, as an objective thing, not something that you just make up on the fly. Lots of things happen in the real world that I don't particularly care for, and I'm sure the same happens to you. But it's reality. And the thing that has me very disturbed is I'm actually going to make a video about it tomorrow, about how the current regime. It seems that they have to destroy democracy in order to save it. Every principle of democracy is being thrown out the window. And I'm wondering, where does it end? That's the thing that I'm wondering about. When is it that the people are going to sort of like wake up and say enough already? Do you have any idea of that?
Well, something like that ends in collapse. Those types of things end in collapse. The only question you have is, what does collapse look like? Does collapse look like, economic, look 1929 or worse? Does collapse look like nuclear war where we're all done? I think we're all seeing where this thing's going. In some level of collapse, and there are those we have our fingers crossed that the empire collapses. Say like the British Empire. The British Empire collapsed, but the UK didn't disappear, and they didn't. It had to contract. And I think there's a level of hope that can happen. We don't know. I think the key to how this thing ends is ultimately based on the people, because provided that we something crazy doesn't happen and we all wake up one day dead because we didn't see it coming. But if this thing continues on a path that doesn't spin into nuclear war, we can have that discussion.
Yeah, because
the question is, at some point, the economic pain gets so bad that the people can't handle it. What do they do? Does the pressure do they wake up and say, wait a minute, I can't vote for these people anymore, either party, because what they're doing doesn't work? Do the people in Europe get to the point where they say, hey, I'm cold and I'm hungry, and we're surrounding the parliament building, and either something's going to change, or, as I have said, look, when people are cold and hungry, they are not rational and very violent. Yeah. And that we could see a time in Europe where people are literally surrounding buildings and saying, look, you know what, there's some politicians in there that's caused us great pain. If things don't change, they ain't coming out, they ain't getting out of this thing alive. And even if things do change, they ain't getting out of this thing alive. People forget that these things happen in the real world, that these potentials are there. And I think those kind of potentials exist. So what do the people do when they wake up one day and realize they've been had, and that they've been pushed into a corner and there's no way out for them?
Yeah. I'm thinking like January 6th, but for real, where they really do storm the Capitol and demand some heads for real, not the farce that we saw on January 6th, because as far as I'm concerned, that was a complete farce. I mean, I was watching it live when it was happening, and you could see the guards just ushering in the people and just all la-di-da. And then later it was like this Bastille moment there. I mean, come on, man. But the thing that I'm hoping for is, between a nuclear war and an economic collapse. Of course, I'm hoping for an economic collapse, because you can rebuild an economic collapse, right? But some sort of nuclear exchange, you can't. And my other fear is that as the economic situation in the United States deteriorates, that there's going to be not only a hell of a lot more repression, but they'll be incentivized. The regime will be incentivized to go to war in order to distract. I mean, every failing country in Latin America, I'm from Chile, and so I know a lot of Latin American history, not as much as I ought to, but enough. And time after time, like in Argentina, this happened in '82, when the Argentines invaded the Falkland Islands because their economic situation was so deteriorating that they said, hey, let's go and invade this country and these islands rather, and gather up popular support that way so they don't lynch us. And my fear is that with all of the misinformation being spread about Ukraine, and how the Russians are evil and the Russians are losing, and that we just have to give them a little more help, and wouldn't it be great if we deployed some American troops and American planes and so forth? to help out the noble Zelensky regime, that can spiral out of control. And there have been, like, recently a lot of moves in that direction. I mean, you see my point. I mean, how can I put it? I would not be surprised if the 2024 elections get suspended altogether because the United States got into some war, the regime got into a war, and they decided that for the good of the nation, because this is a wartime, there can't be an election or something like that. Even though there was an election in the United States in 1864 in the middle of a civil war, but it seems that they will do anything to hold on to power. And so the issue becomes, how do we get rid of these people?
I think a big part of this is Europe, because it appears to me that the Europe economically is going to collapse first. And, if the US empire is an empire, and though the people who run the empire don't want to admit it, Europe is an integral part of their power base, and they are cutting their own throats by wiping out Europe. It's obvious they're wiping out Europe and the reasons for it, but they're cutting their own throats. So what happens when, and I think we're weeks, if not kind of months away, the UK economy is going to collapse. It's on the verge of collapse right now. So the UK, it collapsed. I think that collapses. I think the Germans and the French see it as a canary in the coal mine. Holy crap, what's coming? Because it's not going to be a pretty sight when it falls apart. So I think that the collapse of Europe economically, the social unrest. I mean, how can you maintain any kind of social structure if people are hungry and cold? Europe could go. That people ask about, do you think it could be the Myanmar model? I think it could be far worse for this reason. People have further to fall. The Myanmar model, wherein Myanmar Myanmar that fell apart and the people were wandering around swimming in the presidential palace and stuff like that.
Yeah, and Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka,
Myanmar's like, yeah, whatever.
Don't worry about it.
But you get my point. Okay.
Yeah.
Sri Lanka happened. So there was a question, could this happen in Europe? And I think it could be far worse for this reason.
Yeah, I'm still here, by the way.
The people in Europe have a lot further to fall. So when you are living, a fairly decent standard of living, and that completely collapses down to the point where you're now an impoverished third world nation, people are going to lose their minds. So I don't think the Sri Lanka model is appropriate, because people in Sri Lanka weren't that wealthy in the first place. And so they're pissed because they're poorer than they were.
Right.
I think watch Europe. I think it's going to be very difficult for the U.S. empire to continue pushing outward and to go after China and Iran and blah 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 when their base is just falling apart. And I think that's what comes. And I think kind of in a very unfortunate way, the saving grace for nuclear war, and I hate to even say this, is that Europe crashes and falls apart first. That forces the U.S. to look inward and to try to deal with its problems that it's having as its coalition of the unwilling collapses.
Yeah, I want to ask you something completely different.
Sure.
And you don't have to talk about it. It's something that I've been deeply curious about. What do you think of the whole Kanye West thing?
Yeah, go ahead, you ask me. And for years, I've given the same answer. People say, what do you think about Kanye West? And I say, number one, there's some mental illness issues going there that are very obvious to me. There's, the guy, he's the whole Taylor Swift thing, and then he'll do something like kind of outlandish, and then he might come back and apologize and then do something and to me, Kanye has some issues. The Kanye West thing I find interesting because I go back to as a Black person in America, the Chappelle thing, right? So I'm going to speak to that as a Black person in America. What did Chappelle say that he got hit all over for? He said, look, Black people are kind of a little pissed because we feel like, geez, we've been trying to get a fair shot for 400 years. And, gay people have been like 20 years fighting for their freedom or whatever they're fighting for. I don't know. But you can still say terrible things about a Black guy and get away with it. But if you say boo about a gay person, you're tossed out the window. Right. And there was, I don't want to say jealousy, but a little bit of feeling like being on the back burner. Right. And I think I get that feeling. It's like, well, wait a minute. Kanye said like slavery was a choice. And, he just says over the top things. Right. But to Black people, trust me, they ain't going to be happy to hear somebody say slavery was a choice. But did he get canceled? Nothing. Zero. It didn't even hit the news. And then he said something about a particular other group.
Yeah.
Then everything. And this is not a group that currently is, dealing with terrible poverty and some of these other things, you know what I mean? So I think there's a feeling a lot in the Black community is, well, geez, you can say anything you want about Black folks or whatever, nothing's going to happen. But another particular, that this isn't even about really anti-Semitism. It's another part of this whole Zionist kind of game that says we will utilize that to maintain support for Israel. You know what I mean? To maintain, not Israel, Zionism in reality. We will utilize this issue for political means. That's what it's all it is. So Kanye right now getting canceled. It's a tool that's being used for political means and nothing more, in my opinion. It is not about Kanye, and it's not about what he said. It's like when they had to take Corbyn apart. They didn't like Corbyn, so hey, what are we going to come up with? This is a good one. Same kind of thing. And I think that's a terrible thing that happens in our society. It's like the whole human rights charade, because there really are things that happen to particular groups that need to be fairly and reasonably discussed. But these people don't want to fairly and reasonably discuss them. They just want to use that stuff cynically to smite their enemies or to support their political allies.
Yeah, because the whole situation. I full disclosure, I don't listen to his music. I know very little about him. Quite frankly, I know that he was married to one of the Kardashians, which I think, if you're a big time rapper, couldn't you get better? At least not somebody so she just seems trashy to me. But anyway,
it's the Hollywood thing,
Yeah, I suppose. But the issue for me became kind of like he was canceled across the board. His business deals were all canceled. His lawyers, his talent agency, his management, everybody just threw him under the bus. I mean, he's been wiped clean from anything, and it kind of proves the point of what he said. And so I found it just deeply hilarious, as a disinterested observer. I'm just I'm standing here and 40 kilometers from the front lines. I just found it funny, just screamingly funny. And I'm wondering if Black people, the Black community, look at that and they're like, Ye is right, or Ye, I'm on Ye, so I'm team Kanye or whatever, and that's what I'm kind of curious about.
What I hear in the Black community more is what I said earlier. Well, geez, this particular group here, you're going to get, if you just say anything that can be in some way interpreted as negative, you're going to get your clock cleaned.
Yeah.
But other groups that have legitimate complaints, if you even make the legitimate complaint, nobody's going to say anything. And I don't know what the term is. I guess not jealousy. There's a feeling of injustice for this, that this is not fair. Why does this group get total and complete protection? And then other groups, and that's the other part. To me, the whole absurdity of the whole cancel culture. You know what I mean? The whole, we got to cancel this person. Again, it's a tool. To me, cancel culture is a tool of, what a great paradox. Cancel culture is a tool of oppression, number one.
Oh, yeah.
Number two, it's so cynical because the so-called marginalized groups that they are protecting are actually simply used as human shields. That's all it is. They use it. Okay, well, we're good because we're standing up for Black people or gay people or whoever, right? And then you hold them out and hide behind them and use them to beat the hell out of your enemies with. So if you're using these people as human shields, to me, it's the worst thing. And if somebody has a legitimate discussion about something unfair with their group and within their group or how they're being treated, they can't get a forum anymore because people are sick of hearing the cancel culture bull crap. And when somebody wants a legitimate discussion, people all just interpret, well, that's just some more cancel culture, and they're thrown out the window. So to me, it's the worst thing that can happen to marginalized groups is this whole cancel culture crap.
Yeah, I very much agree. And I very much agree because the cancel culture issue makes, see, with anything new, it's always a small minority that believes in whatever it turns out to be new, that is an accurate representation of reality, that's true, right? You always have, the bleeding edge, the avant-garde, the people who are just a little bit ahead of the curve, who
usually tell the rest, the mass of people, what's really going on. But when you have cancel culture, you kind of like nip in the bud anybody who's at the forefront of understanding what's going on around us. And so the rest of the people don't get an opportunity to hear it, to understand it. See, like for instance, I got canceled, sort of like a mini cancellation, when I discussed a certain massacre in a certain suburb of a certain city here in Ukraine. I dare not mention it, but you all know what I'm talking about.
Exactly what you mean.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. And I said, no, this doesn't make any sense. And I showed why, because, you know, the Russians had left 2-3 days before this whole thing appeared. And there had been no evidence of this. Nobody said anything. And the mayor himself had not mentioned a word after the Russians were gone. And all of a sudden, these individuals popped up, you know, lying around in the street, like almost strategically placed on the street. And I'm like, this is bullshit, right? And I did a video stream on it, and it got taken down. And I pointed out things that were like really obvious. And I pointed out things too that, for instance, there had been in the case that some people had thought that there had been movement of some of the individuals lying there. And I showed, no, it wasn't movement. It's just an optical illusion, because it was like a raindrop sliding by, and it gave the illusion of movement, but there was no movement. And also, like, there was another person who appeared to sit up, but what was actually happening was that they had appeared in the rear view mirror. And you know how on a car, the rear view mirror towards the edges, it curves and gets wide angle? And so it had given the illusion of that. And I pointed this out in my stream. I mean, I was trying to be as even-handed as possible. And yeah, being even-handed doesn't help. But the thing is, see, I was ahead of that particular curve. And oops, do you see me?
Yep.
Am I still
Everything's great. Yep,
okay.
You're here. No problem.
And so I inadvertently hit something. And because of this, you know, the video got taken down. And of course, what happened is that now everybody believes that this certain incident happened in this certain suburb, when it did not. It was a setup. It was a clear setup. And so, yeah, the other thing that drives me a little bit around the bend, or actually a lot around the bend, is that I've noticed that the regime, the American regime, the Western regime, call it what you will, this cosmopolitan internationalist leadership class that is completely separate from the people. I mean, Rishi Sunak, you know, Olaf Scholz, all these people, none of them care even a little bit about their own people. They only care about impressing one another. I mean, like Trudeau, for instance, that's a classic example, right? And so this leadership class that we have in the West, it constantly gaslights, and it constantly projects onto their opponents their own flaws, their own things that they're doing. Like they've been going on and on and on about how the Russians are going to do a false flag with a dirty bomb. And everybody who's seen even a little bit of the evidence is that, it's the other way around, man. What are you talking about? That level of projection just drives me crazy, because it's just, it distorts reality. And I think that if you don't have a firm grasp on reality, you're going to wind up making horrible decisions. And that's the thing that I keep coming back to, the distortion of reality. And I don't see a way out of this gaslighting, this projection, this narrative bullshit. I don't see a way out of it, except, like we were saying, you know, a nuclear war or collapse.
Yeah, some form of collapse, however that takes. You know, one of the big stories here, you know, mine, that I think we should talk about is, some so-called progressive Democrats, about 30 of them, wrote this letter to Joe Biden.
Oh, yes.
And they were like, and it was, you know, I went over this thing in a nutshell. They put it out as though they were asking for diplomacy, as though they were lunging towards peace. When you actually read the letter, they gave Joe Biden and the neocons a tongue bath, for starters. Oh, what you're doing is great. We agree with everything you do. Keep up the good work. They like quoted him. So 99% of the letter was, you're doing great. Keep up the good work. And they reiterated every falsehood and every neocon lie and talking point they could think of. The neocons, I guarantee, love this letter, because it said, you're right about this, and all your talking points are correct, and everything's correct. However, perhaps we should add a little bit of diplomacy. And they even implied that there was some diplomacy going on, and that Joe Biden had already started diplomacy, but he needs to do a little more. It was preposterous on its face. Within 24 hours, they apparently Joe Biden ordered them to denounce themselves, and they, denounced themselves thoroughly and lied. Pramila Jayapal said that it was written in June. Well, here's the thing I find interesting. Yes, I'm former law enforcement and I was an investigator and all that stuff, but it doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to read the letter. And it said in the letter, they talked about the Russia annexing Ukrainian territories. Well, that didn't happen until late September. How the hell did you write a letter in June saying Russia did X if Russia didn't do X until late September? So their excuse was a preposterous lie, and the lie was exposed by the very letter that they wrote. But it was embarrassing. The other thing I think that I learned from this letter is this, or not learned, I already knew, but I think that was expressed by this letter. I have radio shows, and a couple of them in Washington, D.C., one in Los Angeles, and I used to bring on members of Congress. John Conyers, which was a good friend of mine, I used to bring him on. And let me tell you something, he was real. Whether you agreed with him or not, this man believed in certain things, and you knew what he stood for. He's the one that was the Out of Afghanistan caucus, the Out of Iraq caucus. He's another guy who he spearheaded the original bill that stopped that stopped Congress from providing money to the Azov battalion because they were Nazis, right? So this guy was real, and he used to come on my show. And I read that, I'm like, none of these people could come on my show anymore. I used to have members of Congress regularly. I'm in DC, right? Huh. None of them could come on anymore. Because when you read that letter, and it's like, yes, it starts off by saying Ukraine is an independent, sovereign, democratic nation. And I'm like, it's none of the three. How can you overthrow the government of a country and call it democratic, independent, and sovereign? So if I were to have a member of Congress on and they said that, I'd have to have that immediate discussion about 2014. And they could not possibly acknowledge the truth. So they're living now in such a false narrative. They couldn't come on my show anymore on either Los Angeles or DC, because they couldn't acknowledge blatant, obvious reality. So Congress, and you know this, our ruling elite class is completely divorced from the people that they ostensibly rule over, whatever you want to call it.
Represent.
But not just, supposed to represent, but not just in the policies that they have, but also in the actual narrative reality that they live in.
Yeah.
That's the problem. We can't even talk to them anymore. Those of us who live in a fact-based reality, it's kind of like the old Zen saying, the shark and the tiger can never fight, for there's no common ground. How can I talk to these people? I have a ground. My discussion, agree with it or not, is going to be grounded in reality. And there's isn't.
That's the thing. And what's most frustrating of all is that, see, you're a man of the left. I'm a man of the right. If I give you information that you can check up on, you can confirm on your own, I can give you that information and you'll say, oh man, this information that Gonzalo is giving me, maybe I should change my mind about X, right? And the same goes my way. But these people, whatever information you give them, they deny it. Harbeck, Alexander Mercouris, our mutual acquaintance and great guy, he said that Robert Harbeck, the everything minister that the Germans have, right? Whenever he hears anything that is against the Zelensky regime or that signals that the Russians had any kind of justification, not only does he automatically disqualify it and say, oh, that's Putin talking points, he also has the person investigated. I mean, he uses the apparatus of the state to basically intimidate him. And so, of course, nobody's going to tell him something that he doesn't agree with. And of course, what's going on here on the ground is that the Zelensky regime is losing very, very badly. And what's interesting is that, during the last 8 weeks, there have been all these offensives. And what's going on is that at first there were like 30,000 troops and it was like a real deal, right? But at this point, it's like, maybe, half a company, half a company trying to do something, 500 guys trying to make a little noise. and that's it. They're out of men, they're out of material, they're out of everything. And what is increasingly troubling is that the Russians are monitoring a whole lot of Polish and Romanian and English radio chatter. And so, is the Zelensky regime's armed force being de facto replaced by NATO troops? I mean, it looks like that, right? And nobody in the leadership class is actually looking at the war and realizing, hey, this is over. This is going to be a disaster for Ukraine. No, they keep on doubling down. And so this constant, you look to me like a man who's gone to a casino a time or two, right? I certainly have. And you know that old strategy of doubling your bets. You bet on red, you lose it, so you double your bet. And you lose on red again, and what do? You double your bet. You figure at some point it's going to hit, and you'll make it back, right? And we all know how that story ends. It ends badly. It ends with you going absolutely broke and going home in tears, right? Because you just squandered the mortgage payment for the month or whatever, right? And so it seems that in this much more serious situation, the Americans and the Europeans are doing that, doubling down, and now they've run out of chips. The Europeans certainly have, and the Americans seem not too far behind. And so I'm very sad about it, but I don't see a way out except an economic collapse that does not involve widening the war. And I think the priority should be to avoid a widening of the war at all costs, because nobody's going to win, and the Russians, they're going to fight to the death on this one, because it's like, if like China put troops and put material in Mexico and tried to have the Mexicans fight the Americans, the United States would fight to the last man. I mean, you got to understand their point of view, but there's no effort to understand their point of view. I mean, it's tragic.
Two things on Harback. That makes sense to me, and I'll tell you why. Now the U.S. is angry at Musk, and they're going after Musk, and Julian Assange. What is that? If your strength and your power comes from lies, the greatest threat to you is the truth. Yeah. So that's why the censorship, the big fear, the big threat, the problem they have is this: if the American people knew the truth, they wouldn't support it. If the European people knew the truth, they wouldn't support it. So Julian Assange has to be shut up. Every time Harback sees someone doing that, telling the truth, they have to be stopped and they have to be made an example of, which tells you this too: they're not as stupid as we think they are, as some people think they are.
No.
They know what they're doing. They know that they're lying, and the technocrats. I tell you a great book for people to read if they want to understand these technocrats. I'm a big reader. I read a lot of books, but there's a book called Voltaire's Bastards by John Ralston Saul, which talks about the technocrats, how they think, how they got to this point. It goes into history, and once you understand it really explains about these people living in this false narrative. So with Harback, with all of these neocons going after the people who want to tell the truth, they don't have a choice, because the truth is what could bring them down. Now, on Ukraine, on what you were saying about Ukraine, here's my other thoughts to this, about this. There's two ways it could go. Number one, it gets expanded to the point where we're all done. We can't control that. And if that happens, then, we're all gone one day. Let's just hope it's not today. But at any rate, here's the other side of it. And this is a thought that I have that I tend to lean towards. A lot of people think this, but I think about this too, at least as a possibility. If you look at the Kurds, if you look at the history of who the U.S. empire has used as proxies, they use a proxy, they put the proxy out there against whoever this enemy is, great or small, and at some point the proxy is in great jeopardy, and every time the U.S. walks away and lets them get mowed down and just like changes the subject. Hey, Taiwan, let's go. Look at that. I think there's something going on in Taiwan, right? They literally just walk away from a project that doesn't work. They leave the Ukrainians to whatever their fate is. The Europeans, oh, well, sucks to be you guys. Sorry about that. They come up with a new narrative and they go in another direction. So that, yes, it's a possibility that it could spiral out of control in a violent way. But I don't tend to believe that let me be honest. I don't think the U.S. empire gives a crap about the Ukrainians. They're all Slavs. They're happy to see a bunch of Slavs killing themselves. Yay, more Slavs dead. They're happy, right?
Yeah, I think so too.
They're not going to wake up and say, we've got to defend Ukraine. Ukraine's a tool. It is a tool. They sharpened a knife for 6 or 7 years. Now they're trying to poke the Russians with slay the bear with this sharpened knife. Let me know if I'm going too far with metaphors. Slay the bear with a sharpened knife, and the knife is not sharp enough to kill the bear. I don't think they want to fight the bear. I think they're going to walk away and throw that tool away, and off they go for another one. Now, I could be wrong, but if you look at the history, ask the Kurds. You know what I mean? Time and again, they throw people to the side. Now, one could argue to oppose that it's like they see it as existential threat, because the truth is they're losing the world. I got to add this in. I did a show where it showed a bunch of protests in Mali, in Niger, in Haiti, country after country, where the people were protesting and they were holding up Russian flags. A lot of these developing countries who have been crapped on by the U.S. empire for years, they'll like elect somebody, and if it's somebody that the people like, the U.S. kidnaps them, overthrows them, whatever the case may be. A lot of that, most of that world is now looking at Russia saying, "You guys are the heroes. You're fighting the bully, and we support you 100%." And so, could that scare the U.S. to a point where they spiral things out of control? It's possible, but I ultimately, I think the neocons are a bunch of chickens. They don't want to fight. None of them went to war. None of them would. I was a cop. These people would never be a cop. They wouldn't respond to shots fired. They'd run in the other direction and quit the first call they got. They put their behinds in danger. So I think that's a positive way to look at it, whether it's true or false. I tend to think that they're going to leave Ukraine hanging. They're just going to leave a mess like they usually do and walk away and move on to their next misadventure.
I mean, Garland, I truly hope that you're right. Okay, because
me too.
You're absolutely right. And it's very well that you pointed out that every time that their guys, their sons of bitches, start to lose, they drop them. They drop them and walk away. And I fervently hope that will be the case with the Zelensky regime. But on the other hand, they have invested so many chips on this thing, right? I mean, it's not just money, it's political reputation, it's everything. And you're absolutely right. A lot of people in the rest of the world are happy about this. And it's not just, people in some small country waving Russian flags. It's like, for instance, the Saudis saying that they want to join the BRICS and that they want to be buddies with the Russians, right? And not sanctioning, and India not sanctioning. I mean, it's, Afghanistan was a humiliation, the withdrawal last year. Whatever you might think of the Afghan situation over the last 20 years, I thought it was a colossal mistake, but what do I know? But it's undeniable, whatsoever side of the fence you are, that they should have stayed or should have left years ago. Everybody can agree that last year was a humiliation. I mean, good God, right? Those videos of those people hanging on to the plane. I mean, holy cow. I've never seen anything so horrifying, to tell you the truth. And anyway, but the point is, that was humiliating enough. But, and they had invested a lot of chips in Afghanistan, right? But this situation now, I'm hoping that you're right, but I'm thinking to myself that if they do walk away, it'll be too big of a humiliation. There's this interesting concept that one of my viewers pointed me to. I pinned it in one of the videos of a few days ago. I forget which one. It's extinction burst, which is in psychology the notion that when some behavior doesn't get you the results that you want, you start thrashing around even harder. You typically see it with a baby, with a child. I don't know if you have kids or not, but I've had my experience with small children, and they'll throw a tantrum sometimes when they're little, when they're like 2 or whatever, they want cookies or candy or whatever. And you tell them no, and they throw a little bit more of a tantrum and say, okay, fine, here's one candy. And they get used to this regime of throwing a little tantrum and they get what they want. But when you decide, okay, I'm going to cut it, then their tantrum spirals out of control, and it just spirals and spirals, and they do more and more drastic things. And that's why, of course, you have to nip that in the bud as quickly as possible insofar as children is concerned. But unfortunately, we have hysterical adults on our hand here. And my thinking is that these hysterical adults in this extinction burst, where they realize that they've hit their limit, that they're not going to get their way, that they start, throwing an endless tantrum that just spirals out of control. That's my great fear, because you're absolutely right that they always walk away when things when things aren't happening as they want them to, with their proxy, agents, if you will. But in this case, I'm wondering if this is going to be the exception, because the stakes are so high. And a big humiliation in this confrontation, this proxy war, it would mean that, it's not just China and India, it's also Saudi Arabia and the developing world. They're all going to say, hey, the Americans are just a paper tiger. And so let's side with the Russians, rather. Let's make friends with the Russians, who seem, at least, they seem to be honest brokers, because that's the other thing. Americans, they never live up to the American government. They never live up to their agreements. They agree with you, and then later they fuck you over, And so it's like, I'm wondering if the stakes have become too high, I suppose, is my long-winded way of asking this.
Well, I think there's something else to take into consideration. Oddly enough, a lot of people felt like they wanted this thing to be over in a week, a month, I'm coming to the conclusion that longer is better, that it's a good thing that this thing is dragged out. Because, if it all
who is it
done,
better? For who is it better?
For all of us. Because my discussion is about the survival of humankind. I think that's a big part of our discussion. I mean, it's a sad state of affairs, but I think that's really the ultimate end of our discussion. Do we get out of it? I had a professor once that said, everyone listens to the same radio station, WIIFM, what's in it for me, right? So what it comes down to is everybody's now looking at this thing and saying, do we get out of this one alive, right? I think that if everything had happened at the beginning, the U.S. still felt strong. They felt that their coalition was strong. They had the people in Europe and the people in the U.S. were going along with it. We were getting the 24-hour propaganda, and everybody, we're 100% behind it. It gets more every day. It gets a little more difficult as they start feeling the heat, as the people in that the leaders in Europe are calling them saying, we don't know how much longer we can keep this up. We got real problems here. And I don't know.
What have you heard in that regard, by the way?
Well, I've heard that. I've heard that discussion is being had, that it's like we're holding on as long as we can. So the bottom line is, because it's taken a long time, and other things are chewing away at their power base and things like that, it's better off, because it's not a sudden collapse. This is kind of a slow, and if you're looking at it, this is a collapse that's been going on for 9 or 10 months here. I think we got a few more months of it. But ideally, to me, timing wise, when the inevitable happens and the Ukrainian military, political, power base collapses, and obviously the social base is going to collapse, because there's not going to have the power and the things that they need. When that happens, Europe will kind of have already fallen apart, and they will be in disarray at home. And I think and they won't feel as powerful.
You think that'll be like in January? What kind of timeline are you thinking?
I'm thinking December, January, which again is opportune, because Europe is going to be in the worst possible way it can be, as far as, economically and physically, for dealing with the cold, and politically dealing with a tremendous, an insurmountable backlash. So I think the time is on the side of us existing. The longer this thing, I think, plays out, the weaker the empire gets, and the less likely they are. And the other thing is, I do not feel that the neocons are suicidal. I think that they're cowards. I don't think that there's some brave people that are going to grab their muskets and charge, into the enemy lines. And they don't want to die. They're living here a few miles from where I am in Northern Virginia, in beautiful homes with all this crap. They don't want to lose that stuff. And then people say, well, they have bunkers. Really? Here's what I have to say. If we're having a nuclear war and I got to live in a bunker for my last 5 years and living off of powdered eggs, I'd rather go out in the first blast.
Yeah,
put me in that bunker, because they'll be in the bunker, and what'll happen in the bunker sooner or later, maybe a year or two down the line, the guards and the cooks and the people in the bunker will wake up and say, there's nothing outside here.
Yeah.
And they don't really have any power over us, and we have guns. Perhaps we should eat them. We can last a little longer if we eat them. What do we do with them? Should we beat them because they got them in here? Should we eat them and freeze their bodies? Do the Donner Pass thing? At some point, they're going to be in a
fat enough. Why not?
Exactly. So, as soon as they go to the bunker with their armed guards become powerful people, and they're not. And sooner or later, so I don't think these people want to spend their last days eating powdered friggin' milk and eggs in a bunker. I think they're going to ultimately just walk away and pretend like nothing happened. And they've done it before, and it's worked. Why wouldn't they think it would work again?
But yeah, that's a very good point. And I mean, it goes to your point that they always do the same thing. They pick the most extreme group in some country that they want to destabilize, because they're the only ones who have the motivation, and they arm them to the teeth and let them loose and cause havoc. And then, of course, when those extremists are beaten back, then they just like say, "Oh, sorry," and then just walk away. I'm hoping that, and I kind of like agree on your timeline that January is going to be an infernal month for Europe. Sorry for the malapropism there, but yeah, they're going to be cold, dark, hungry, not even cell phone reception, because the towers they're going to go out, right? And oh, by the way, parenthetically, chat, I'm sorry that I look like Darth Vader. With Garland, we were kidding around that I look like the Dark Brandon speech.
Yeah.
Like yeah. But it's it's in the terrace. That's the only place where I can, yes, and in the terrace is really the only place I can smoke, or I don't want to smoke inside. But anyway, the point is, okay, let's say there's no escalation at the pace of things going here in Ukraine. I can say very confidently that the West is running out of munitions to send and weapons to send. They're sending their third and fourth tier gear at best. Number one. Number two, the Zelensky regime, it's run out of men. Okay, all the able-bodied men have fled or been killed. Okay, or incapacitated, and or POW, because the Russians have something like 6,000 or 7,000 POWs, and that alone tells you a hell of a lot. And the credible numbers, I've been really trying to find the credible numbers of killed in action and wounded, incapacitated. And it seems that the number of killed in action is around 120 to 150,000 forces, and wounded, incapacitated, roughly 1.5 times that number, about 175,000. So
Minimum.
you're talking 300,000. Yeah, and that's minimum. Okay, that's minimum. Some numbers are way out there, okay, but they seem to be more propaganda. Russian propaganda. The actual number of KIA, 125,000, wounded in action, incapacitated. Not something that you can just patch up and send back to the front. An additional 175. So you're talking about 300,000 who are out of action. And the original Ukraine armed force in February was 240,000 men. So they've ground through all of those guys, or a majority of them, and they're grinding through their territorial defense forces. They're running out of men. And of course, a lot of these territorial defense forces, when the war broke out, they fled. This is a country of 44 million people. It's credibly estimated that at least 12 million have fled. Something like 4 million to Russia, and an additional 8 to 9 million to the West. And they're not coming back. And what's interesting too, which I think is a disaster, is that, see, in order to get out, for a man to get out, a military-age man to get out, the only real way to do so at the start of this conflict was to pay off a border guard. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
But most of the people who fled were women and children and elderly people. But the key issue is the women. See, they're gone, and after all these months, they're settled in their life in Poland and Romania and wherever. They're not coming back. They are most definitely not coming back. So this country is broken irretrievably, and it's a disaster for Ukraine. And so, yeah, they completely broke it. I remember Colin Powell had that saying, if you broke it, you own it, right? In this case, the Americans broke it, and I hope to God that they'll walk away. But I tend to agree that by the end of this, the Russians are starting up this big offensive in mid-November, and they are loaded for bear. And sorry for the pun, I'm all over with the malapropisms today, but they are ready with everything they've got, and they're going to start in mid to late November, and they're going to sweep. And so the issue becomes, if they do sweep out, they're going to be running into just token forces, because they're already annihilated, and they'll probably take over the whole country. And insofar as the Europeans, you're right, in January, they're going to be collapsing. And so maybe January, February is when this thing will finally wind down. I mean, that's what I'm hoping for.
Well,
This
let me
thing,
ask you. Let me ask you too. Another consideration I think we should take into account.
sure.
And I'd like to get your thoughts on it. Here's the other part of it. At some point, there are entire swaths of Ukraine, towns and cities, etc., where all the men have gone to the front and there are women and children waiting for them to come back. And at some point, they're going to realize none of them are coming back.
They
None
know.
of them. They're
Yeah.
all the men, all the boys, all the guys up to age 60 in their town. They're going to say to the government, yeah, when do the guys return from the front? Well, it's a little hairy. We'll let you know when they come back, but they ain't ever coming back. Number one. Number two, total economic collapse. And it's going to be kind of like, Kosovo, where it will be a state that can, whatever's left of Ukraine only can be supported by the West. Economically, as the West is collapsing economically itself, right?
Exactly.
So they're going to have to deal with an internal reality inside Ukraine of an economic collapse, of a social collapse. You're going to deal with this huge country with all these people. If the war ended, I would argue there'll be at least as big an exodus of Ukrainians once they wake up and realize I'm in a failed state.
Yeah,
I'm getting the hell out of here. And so now you got a secondary exodus of Ukrainians, while now the Poles start to say, hold on, we're full. And the Western countries start to say, A, our people are unhappy and our country's falling apart economically, and 1 million more Ukrainians want to come in and we can't handle them. And now you've got that issue of the secondary exodus, the internal complete collapse of Ukraine. So they're going to have to not just deal with that, they're going to have to deal with Ukraine. And how does Zelensky and or whoever, if they're going on with this thing into the winter, maintain the facade that this is a united country who's standing up, fighting against this oppressor, when internally their economic and social cohesion is completely gone? So there's that doesn't get discussed much, but I think that's an important factor an important issue that will factor into how this thing outcomes. Again, as if we said, if it doesn't spiral into some nuclear war and we're all dead, well, that none of this conversation matter. Well, I guess it does matter. We've had it, so whatever. But you get my point.
Have a historical record, yeah.
In a philosophical Zen way, everything matters, right? So, but other than that, you get what I'm saying. Your thoughts on the internal Ukraine part of this?
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right that there are a lot of towns and villages where they're like, where are our men? Where did they go? Because they haven't been in touch, no calls, no nothing. And so they're the women and older people, yeah, they are raising up a stink, and it's being repressed. And what they're doing is that one of the things that's really interesting is that, with the control of social media and television stations and the repression of any kind of a dissident party, which is what the Zelensky regime has done, it's actually very easy to control what people think here. And so they're not aware of this, because you see, like, for instance, in your case, you might have a son who went off to war, right? I actually don't know how old you are. I mean, I hope you're roughly my age. I have a 27-year-old son, so
I've got a 34-year-old daughter. So I don't have any sons. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You raise up a stink. Where's my kid? Right. But you don't hear anybody else saying it, not on social media, which is tightly controlled, especially Telegram. Telegram is extremely controlled here because that's turned out to be the social media site that everybody follows, and which is pretty interesting. But anyway, Telegram is tightly monitored, and dissident channels are expunged, and sometimes the operators are arrested. That's basically what happened to me. And that's why they took my phone, and so I don't have access to my Telegram channel. And it is because Telegram, it's very easy to translate stuff. Okay. And so people can see something in Cyrillic and just tap, and they can see it in English, and vice versa, of course. And so they tightly control the information, and all the TV cable channels, they all have like the same kind of broadcast. It's propaganda, keeping up with spirits, that kind of thing. And so, in fact, this war is tailor-made for the team that they have, because they're information specialists. I mean, they're all like actors and TV producers and stuff like that. And so they don't worry about the domestic population, because they have the information so tightly controlled.
And this goes to a point, is that, see, in the United States, you have these monopolistic companies, Twitter, Facebook, Google, and they can control the information that you see, and you will never find out something that they don't want you to find out, that they have deliberately tried to suppress. And it's becoming worse and worse in the West, right? I mean, like Twitter and Facebook, like our mutual friend Brian Berletic, you've been on Brian's show, right?
No, I haven't, but I watch him all the time.
Yeah, well, he got shit canned from Twitter and Facebook, and you've seen him. I mean, does he look like somebody who's like, I don't know, flashing nudies or saying something that he shouldn't? No, he's incredibly measured, circumspect, and he got shit canned. Hello, are you there? Hello? 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 Chat, do you guys hear me? I don't know if you guys hear me because I don't see Garland. Garland froze up. Okay, you guys can hear me. I guess something happened with Garland. Okay. Hey, stop spamming a little bit so I can read some of the comments, because I need to find out what happened. Is Garland the one that is freezing up? Hit me with a +1 if it's Garland. Hit me with a +2 if it's me that's frozen up. And you hear me, but not Garland. Okay. That's actually kind of unusual. Okay, and so now that we have this moment alone, chat, Garland is the one who's out of action, okay? Yeah, YouTube is having problems? Okay, I don't know about that. I'm waiting here for Garland to unfreeze. Okay, and now that we have a moment alone, chat, you know, I thought to myself, you guys all know that I have a Patreon. Well, you know, and every Sunday I do these Q&As, these comments. I mean, I bring up everybody, just listeners, and we bring them on and we talk about stuff, right? And I hope you'll subscribe. The link is going to be in the description below. I forgot to put it in. In the other videos, you'll have it. But I'm also thinking of opening an OnlyFans. So who wants me to do an OnlyFans? Put OF if you want me to open up an OnlyFans. It'll be me. And I'll be showing off my double chin and my pot belly. You know, if you're very nice and throw some shekels my way, I'll show you my my man boobs. Who wants a Gonzalo Lira OnlyFans? Okay, I'm just vamping around until Garland comes back. Oh man, this is a real pity because I was having a great time with Garland. Chat, I hope you were enjoying the conversation with Garland. He's a great guy, very knowledgeable, and it's fun to talk to somebody like him. And no, I don't know what's happening, man. I'm looking at the chat here. Man boobs, please. Yes. Oh, here's Garland again. Here, let me pull him up.
So I took out my phone.
Garland, are you there?
Oh, wait a minute. It looks like my internet's coming. Can you hear me at all?
Yeah, I hear you fine. You're
wonderful. Yeah, my internet went out, and so I took out my phone. So I'm going to try that, give that a shot.
No, the irony is that, you know, I was like, before the show, I told you, you know, if I freeze or disappear for a bit, just keep on going. It's just a glitch in the internet here. And it's funny that it happened to you instead.
Yes,
you know, maybe you're being watched by the FBI. You heard that story about that guy, Meeks, I forget his first name, that guy who was writing a book on the Afghanistan withdrawal, and he got
the guy that disappeared?
Yeah, that guy. I mean, you've heard anything about that? Because some people are starting to say that he was actually hooked up to intelligence and God knows what.
I don't know, but you know, I will say this. Yeah, there's something fishy there. Either he disappeared, or you know, he was disappeared, or you're right. It's possible that he was there. Wait a minute. It looks like I'm back. This is weird. Lots of weird things going on here. Let me see if I'm back on the computer. Let's see. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
Okay. Let me put this.
Let me add you, because there's also your computer version. Let me add you there.
Yeah, let's do the computer version. And why don't I kill? Sure.
Yeah, I'll
If I can
remove
figure out how to get
the
out of
phone.
this one.
Yeah.
There we go.
Oh man,
All
the
right.
moderns of the wonders of modern technology. I had you multicammed for a moment there, your phone and your computer, at the same time. So that everybody could see what a handsome man you are. Because I was teasing the chat while we were waiting for you to come back on. I was just saying that I was going to open an OnlyFans, and I want to know how many in the chat would pay to see my man boobs and my pot belly. A surprisingly large number, So you should consider it. You should consider it, Garland. You're a good-looking man. You don't have the double chin that I do, which
Yet.
unfortunately is hidden behind my thing. Not yet. Yeah. Because you got
Well, you know what's interesting? I don't know if
discipline into it.
I don't know if you know this. I was on Fox. Did you know I was on Fox News for years?
No, yeah, I did.
For many, many years. So, and I was on I was on Tucker Carlson. I was, you name it. The only show I never went on was Hannity, but I went on all the rest of them. What was the guy what's his name? He came on at 8, and I hated his show because he would talk over you all the time. The O'Reilly Factor.
Oh yeah,
I didn't like that because he couldn't get anything out. I was very good friends with Laura Ingraham. I was on that show very, very regularly. So I really enjoyed my time at Fox. And here's the interesting thing. I was in law enforcement. I'm a lefty, unabashed lefty. I'm honest about who I am. But of course, in law enforcement, most of the people are conservatives. And my friends were mostly conservatives. I'm at Fox, and I was very good friends with a lot of people there who are conservative. And one of the things I've learned in life, I think, that other people are starting to pick up, because I would get heat for it, right? We can disagree politically. We can disagree ideologically. We can look at the same two things, and we can interpret them differently because we have a kind of a different map of the world. That's fine. But because of that doesn't mean that I'm better or worse than you, or that we can't be friends and go fishing and be the best of friends, because I will guarantee you, one person may be an atheist, the other person's a Catholic, and the other person's a Muslim. One person may be a left or right or wherever. And one of the things that I hate in the United States, and this is pushed by the mainstream media and pushed by the neoliberals, and that is, you have to dislike people that you have ideological disagreements with, that they are evil. And I think that plays into the foreign policy, because they're always creating monsters. This country over here is evil. This country over here is good. And I'm a big believer. I don't know about you. I can't speak for other people. One of the things that I've got out of this, that I've recognized, is this. I believe in independence and sovereignty for nations. I believe, look, Hungary, that it's a conservative culture. They elected a conservative guy. They should be able to run their damn country any way they choose. Venezuela, socialist, whatever, right? Look, that's up to the Venezuelans. However they do that, that's theirs. One of the things I think we're seeing is there are a lot of people now who are waking up to say, look, we got problems of our own. There was a famous rap song by Public Enemy, Flavor Flav, and he says, and I'll never forget this, and it makes sense. He said, it was called "I Can't Do Nothing for You, Man," and he says, "I can't do nothing for you, man. I'm too busy trying to do for me." Very, very philosophically deep. There is nothing wrong with people. If you've got a community, you've got a town, you've got a country, saying, look, we've got people in our community, we're working to better our community. Look, your community's over there. Work to better yours. If it works for you, fine. If it doesn't, fine. Just leave us the hell alone or be friends with us. But do things your way. And I'm big on that. And so it pisses me off when I hear people talking about Orban. Well, Orban, he's a lefty. He's a right winger. He's this. I'm like, that's their damn country. It's none of your business.
Yeah.
And right now, as a lefty, ask me if I got to spend this winter in France or Hungary. I'm choosing Hungary.
You're going to be warm at least.
Warmer. Give me somebody who's practical. I may not ideologically align with this person, but let's just start with a practical person who says, hey, you know what? I listen to my people. They want me. And in fact, what did Orban say when they asked him about like the gas stuff and all this? He said, let's do a referendum and see what the people think. Hey, how am I going to complain about a guy? Ideologically, I ain't aligned with him, but a referendum is democracy. If I'm in that country, it gives me the opportunity to vote my conscience. And afterwards, I can say, well, I wanted it to go this way, but it went that way. I can live with that. What I can't live with is when we don't have a say in our government. And I just feel like I look at Iran and people criticize all of these countries, Saudi Arabia, oh, they're doing terrible things. Okay, yeah, maybe they're chopping people's heads off, things I may not like. But I ain't Saudi. Let the Saudis deal with that. Let them figure out how to deal or not deal with that. I don't know or understand their culture, and their culture, it is what it is. You know, and I think that's a big part of what a lot of people, where a lot of people with some ideological differences are coming together. It's simply, okay, fine, but let's kind of look out for ourselves at the most basic level first, the both basic human needs. We need food, we need heat, we need things of that nature. Let's handle our business and tell the other people out there, handle your business too. Best of luck to you. We'll work with you. If it benefits us and it benefits you, we'll work out a deal. Other than that, we'll be over here doing our thing. And I think that's all a lot of people want. And we get criticized just for that.
No, what it seems to me is that, first of all, the ideological differences between, for instance, you and I, we pretty much have a common vision as to what kind of society we would like. We would like a society where everybody's relatively healthy, where everybody's looked after, everybody has all the opportunities that they could want in order to achieve whatsoever those abilities, those inherent abilities they may have, let them achieve the maximum with them. I mean, I think that we would agree with that. But what's happened is that ideologically, it's become an issue that the other side is just evil, because it's so much easier to demonize. It's just so easy just to say that guy over there, he's just evil. You know, like, for instance, with this discussion about Putin, for instance, they keep saying that he's a crazy megalomaniacal dictator and whatnot. Dude, he is one of the moderate people in the Kremlin, number one. And he is a very patient, very slow-going, very methodical guy. That's why he's stayed in power for so long. He's not a fly-by-the-seat-of-his-pants guy. He's no crazy at all. On the contrary, he is a representative of a wide swath of the people in leadership in the Kremlin, right? But instead of that nuanced position, oh, he's evil. And if you say, oh, you know, there's more to him than just being Putler, you're automatically, oh, you're a Kremlin agent, you're a Kremlin bot. That's the demonization. And that's the thing is, I think it is because of social media. And I hate when people blame everything on social media, you know, but I think that this is one issue. Not only social media, but also on the news channels that have all become so ideological. Because back when I was growing up, and I bet the same with you, you know, when we were growing up, the news organizations, the mainstream news organizations, would present both sides and try to be as even-handed as possible. And, you know, you never really knew what Walter Cronkite was thinking. Because he would do his show and give you, like, you know, this side thinks this side thinks that. And it was accurate. It wasn't a caricature and it wasn't a lie. It was more or less accurate as to what they were thinking, right? But now it's all of these, I mean, like Fox News, it's ideological. But all the others are too. CNN, MSNBC, it's insane. The New York Times, which, you know, prided itself with being, you know, the newspaper of record, it's just ideological garbage. It's
have you seen the Twitter battle now with Elon Musk and the New York Times?
Oh yeah, you know, my thinking on that, I think that Elon Musk deliberately has been poking the government with his tweets about the Russia, because I think he wants to get out of the deal. Okay, and I think that. He realizes that he's overpaying for something, because it's not worth $46 billion. No. It's probably worth closer to 10, because I think that very few people are actually on it. I think that if I had to guess, I'd say a third of them are robots, you know,
at least.
Yeah. At least. And so I think that he's playing the game, but he ultimately, I mean, I won't believe it until he actually is owner of it and actually starts implementing policies for free speech. Because I got kicked off of Twitter. On the one hand, I hate it because I don't have that place where I can talk to anybody. But on the other hand, I love it because it was such a huge time suck. I mean, I don't know if it's happened to you. Are you still on Twitter?
Yeah, I'm still on Twitter, and I still use Twitter regularly. And they haven't tossed me out or attacked me for the most part. I've been left alone somewhat on Twitter, but I kind of understand it. I kind of understand where I can go and where I can't. So I use Twitter. And if you follow my Twitter account, I have fun. You know, I've used
Yeah.
some sarcasm and things of that nature, but you know, so far, but that doesn't mean anything. If they decide they want to toss me tomorrow, they'll just make something up. You know, you could say
Yeah.
hello and they'll say, oh, that was anti-Semitic. Well, you got to go. You know, if they choose to, whatever you say, if they choose to toss you out, you're a goner. You know, social media is now one good thing that came of this, I think. And that is the Biden administration, two things they did. Number one, there's word out that and I saw this, they're considering investigating Elon Musk, the government investigations. That's good. Let me tell you why, because it exposes them. That what they're saying is this: we may investigate your you know, they pull a crossfire hurricane like we did on Trump, not because we think you did anything wrong, but to use the law enforcement powers of the state as a tool of oppression to smite our enemies. The other thing, and I think that needs to be exposed, I think the other thing is Joe Biden, the White House is now saying that they will, Biden, the guy's a vegetable, so I'm not Joe Biden, whoever his handlers are saying,
his puppeteer,
exactly, that they may, what are they saying? They may nix the deal because of national security concerns. Well, you're now admitting that Twitter is a national security tool. So I think those are two good things that come out of this that wake people up. And let's not forget, there have been legitimate battles historically throughout history between various factions of the ruling elite. And it is possible that the faction of the ruling elite that Elon Musk is in has some issues with other factions of the ruling elite, and that they can spar over various and sundry things, because historically that's happened for hundreds of years. You know, the ruling elite, the industrialists versus the people. You know, even right now, I would argue here, the people who are the China Russia thing. The people who are the industrialists, they want to go after China because China has all of this industry. The people who are the you know, the commodities traders and the Exxon Mobils, et cetera, they want to go after China because China has commodities. That even now, those things are factions of the ruling elite kind of battling over who they want to destroy, which at this point, it ain't happening. You know what I mean? You're maybe the most powerful country in some ways, and you're going to go after the number 2 and 3. They're going to be more powerful combined than you, and that's not going to work. But, you know, these people aren't smart enough to figure that out.
No, the thing that bothers me so much about what America is doing and has been doing over the last 25 odd years is they go and mess around in other countries instead of spending all of those resources and that attention in fixing up the United States. I have a number of acquaintances who have told me the differences between, say, China and the United States. And insofar as like public transportation, insofar as infrastructure is concerned.
Roads, everything.
Yeah, and it's night and day. I mean, you know, you go to New York, and this has been going on for decades now. You go to New York City, right? The subway is a disgrace. It looks like something out of just the worst third world shithole you could ever imagine, right? And this is New York City. This is supposed to be, you know, here in Kharkov, they've got the metro system, right? It's beautiful. It's gorgeous, and every station has a different decoration in a clear and definite different styles. Some of them are gorgeous. Some of them are kind of gaudy. Okay. But you know, that happens. But what's interesting is that they make the effort to make something beautiful so that people feel happy. But in the United States, the roads, the subways, you know, the public transportation, trying to get a train from one place to another. You were telling me that you had gone on a train between New York or Washington or vice versa. And what was that experience like? It was probably kind of crappy.
Let me tell you, the infrastructure here is crap. You drive the roads, the major highways from state to state, which used to be beautiful and smooth. Now there's potholes, and rather than permanently fix the road, you know how they do in a road, you'll see these temporary pothole fixes that last a little bit, and they're kind of like lumpy looking crap, and it just kind of eventually collapses and the pothole comes back. You see that all over I-95, a major road, and I think this is what this kind of neoliberal order brings. It funnels everything in your society. Every dime is funneled to the top 1/4%. And so there's no money left for the people, for infrastructure, for anything. It's how can we get more money? Look right now, for even in Europe, for all of the discussion about how bad things are for the people, Royal Dutch Shell, Exxon Mobil, these commodities companies, they're making 300% profit. You know what I mean? They've still figured out there's that small group of people. And I still believe this. Their plan for Europe is what they do everywhere. Okay. Number one, you wipe out the economy and you destroy the price of everything. Now, everything is worth pennies on the dollar. Every industry, property, everything, right? And you're the one with the money. You go in, you buy all that stuff at pennies on the dollar, you refloat the economy, boom, you got it. And that's another thing I think of a reason that I think they don't want to end it all, because I think they got a plan for Europe. And it's the typical neoliberal plan. Even, see, they want to take out 3 of their adversaries, right? The 3 big economic blocs, China, Russia, and the EU. Well, if they can get 1 of the 3, they'll be okay. So they're going to take Europe, and they're going to be like, and everybody's like, oh, Russia, Russia. Yeah, they're looking at Russia and Europe. So what happens if they say, okay, we can't get Russia, but what we can do, we'll annihilate the economy here. We buy everything for pennies on the dollar like we like to do. We refloat the economy, and we've made a fortune anyway. And now we own everything in you. Basically, they are stealing Europe from Europe. They're trying to do to Europe what they tried to do to Russia in the 1990s and got kicked out. That's what they're doing it to Europe right now. The difference is the Europeans don't have a Vladimir Putin that's going to come in and say, cut it out, guys. It ain't going any further. So any way you look at it, they still got a big win in Europe.
Yeah. But the thing that I'm just, see, I agree with all of your analysis. Okay. My only fear is that they've got such a hard on for Russia. They hate it so much that my fear is that they won't just wash their hands and walk away. And that's my great fear.
It's a valid fear.
You know, and you know, Putin, Shoigu, and the whole group in the Kremlin have been going apeshit over this dirty bomb, and it's like a real thing. And it's interesting. Some details emerged today that chat you guys might not know, and perhaps Garland, you read about it. But the Russians even revealed that the exact plan that the Zelensky regime had, they were going to use a Tochka-U missile and disguise it with components of one of the missiles that the Russians use, not the Kalibra, one of the other ones. I forget, but they named the missile. And their goal was to explode this dirty bomb over Chernobyl, of all places, you know, sort of like perhaps limit the damage to a place that's already damaged. And they would discover these clues that would say that, oh, it was the Russians who did it, which of course makes absolutely no sense. You know, they were going to claim that the Russians fired it from Belarus and that it was going for Kiev and that their air defense systems knocked it down, and they would recover this evidence and present it to the world as if the Russians had fired it from Belarus when it was, you know, their own dirty bomb that they themselves set off, right? And they were going to do it over Chernobyl, because I've been thinking, and I did a video about this, I was thinking to myself that it might be a smart idea for them to blow it up over Nikolaev, because they were evacuating Nikolaev, and Nikolaev is on the road to Odessa. And so I was thinking maybe that's their plan. But as of today, that's the current information, which, chat, hit me with a +1 if you think that this is a crazy plan, because it seems so to me. And Larry Johnson yesterday on the broadcast or a couple of days ago on the broadcast I was doing with him, he was telling me, look, the fact that the Russians are calling it out in such detail will probably put the nix on this plan, because they're going to be like, you know, we've been found out. And so to go ahead with it, you know, it's just not going to serve our purpose, because there's too many people talking about it and following what the Russians are saying. But anyway, it leads me back to that issue of the extinction burst that I mentioned before, of throwing a colossal tantrum when you know that you're not getting your way and you're about to come to the end, and you're just throwing a complete hissy fit. That seems to be what is going on with the Zelensky regime, with the Europeans, with the Americans, but I keep insisting, and I know that this is, you know, I'm beating a dead horse here, but my fear is that these guys, that they escalate in a spiral, and that there's no way to stop them, because they get so desperate. Because you've as a police officer, you've seen people when they get really, really desperate, they do crazy ass stuff that they'd never dream of doing if they were, you know, if they were not in the grip of an enormous panic. And that's my fear, because I mean,
And
like I
that's
said, you're a police officer, you've seen
yeah.
this, right?
And that's why, yeah, well, I've retired, but I was, and that's why the other part of it is this, why I think the slow motion, that the longer this thing slows down, moves slowly, the less likely that is, because it's, a panic is usually caused by something sudden and unexpected. And oh my God, I didn't see that coming. If it kind of unfolds slowly, people tend to, the same thing can happen to you. Right. As an example, I'm, elderly parents. I know there's a big difference. Like my parents who were elderly died, when 80, one 90, right? But like with both of them, they were sick over long periods of time, and blah, blah, blah. And eventually you come to realize the reality of what's going to happen. And then you were okay with it when they finally passed away, right? As opposed to somebody gets a call, hello, yeah, your mom just got ran over by a steamroller. You
Jesus.
freak out, you might, oh my God, whatever people, okay.
Yeah.
So I think the other part of it, and again, I say that for my law enforcement career, there's a big difference when someone gets a sudden shock, how they react, as opposed to they get time to think about. And now you're getting calls from the Europeans. Hey, dude, I don't know how longer I can hang on. My people here are ready to hang me, and I think they may eat me because they're hungry, right? Biden's like, hey, but the French are about to fricassee Macron. What do you think about it? Right. Yeah. So, but what happens is these things, and it gets to a point where you kind of see it coming, even if you don't want to admit it, and it unfolds slowly. So I think of what we should pray for is that it unfolds nice and slowly and evenly and predictably, instead of a sudden boom. And it happens. I think one of the things the Russians are doing is I don't think they're going to just smash. A lot of people think they're going to line up and smash. I don't think they will. I think they're moving slowly. They're going to dig in as they're attacked by the Ukrainians. They're going to repel the attacks, and the Ukrainians will get weaker and weaker. And I think by the time they get ready to act, the end will be inevitable, because the Ukrainians are weakening themselves with these relentless, foolish, suicidal attacks. So that's how slow does this thing unfold? The slower it unfolds, the safer it is. And, having arrested people before that were very bad actors, it all depends on the approach that the police officer uses. How do they feel like they're, you know what I mean? There's ways that you can address people where you can kind of ease them into the idea that there maybe in a few minutes they may have handcuffs on, heading to the hoosegow, as opposed to saying there's officers that just don't get it. You put your hands on the car. You're getting locked up right now, and you suddenly shock the person. They're more likely to fight.
Yeah, because actually, I wish my account were still around, because I could show you that several months ago, I said that the thing that the Russians had to avoid at all cost was a Pearl Harbor moment, a 9/11.
Right.
A big shock. It had to be a grinding, slow-going affair that was just, a little bit here, a little bit there, a little village here, a little village there, that kind of approach. The Russians. And to round off our conversation, the Russians, everything is going their way. I mean, have you noticed that? And are the Americans noticing that?
Time is on their side, as the Rolling Stones said. But it has to, because if your enemies, what's the Iranians say? Thank God for making my enemies fools. Let's face it. If you're going up against the Biden administration, these people are idiots. You can't lose. I mean, now, if you're playing Scrabble with Biden, you probably don't have a chance, because this guy makes up words. He just makes up words. You're never going to win a game of Scrabble. But anything else, with these friggin' clowns, you can't lose. Just sit back, get out of the way, and watch them do one stupid thing after another until they surround themselves. So that's the other side of it too. If you got a lunatic idiot who is your adversary, you kind of move along and let this person just keep screwing things up worse and worse and worse. I'll tell you another thing too. And this is important, I think. We are in a dangerous time because we're 2 weeks before the midterms, and these idiots could do something prior to the midterms, number one, or the other side is they may feel like, look, we don't want to shake things up. If we do something just prior to the midterms and it goes bad, then we're really screwed. The other part is what happens after the midterms. I think the Democrats take a beating, And I do believe there will be some parties inside the Democratic Party, some elements that say, what are we going to do? We just got wiped out. We're going in the wrong direction. There will be some questions. Now, of course, you know what they do. They'll look for a person to blame. It's that guy's fault. Out he goes and everything will work. But who that guy is could be old Dark Brandon. It could be like, hey, you know, if we just move you and Hunter Biden out of here, things may clean. So, well, of course, then again, they got Kamala. Jesus. Let me tell you something. You got to give Biden credit. That was one of the most brilliant political moves in history of brilliant political moves. When you get Kamala Harris, they ain't killing you. Nobody's going to ever want you out of office if Kamala Harris is behind you.
You know, let me ask you something. I think that she's stoned half the time, that she's been smoking pot like in the morning, you know, because the way she talks, she reminds me of girls who have been smoking dope. You know what I'm saying?
I think she's stupid. I think it would help. I think she should try it. Realistically, because if you look at her, she's, you know what, she kind of reminds me, it makes me think, having done a lot of television. There's some people that when they get in front of a camera, like you and I, we're in front of a camera, you know, I've been in front of a camera, done a lot of TV, I've hosted TV shows. You just act normal. You just be yourself, right?
Yeah.
But there are other people that as soon as they get in front of a camera, they think they have to be something, right? And so she gets in front of the camera and she starts this, well, there are big countries and there are little countries. You don't talk like that normal. And the big countries eat the little countries up, like she's always talking, like she's on Sesame Street all the time, right?
Yeah.
But the bottom line
exactly,
is,
like on Sesame Street, exactly right. Yeah.
That's how she talks to everybody. But I think that she's one of these people that A, she's not very bright, and B, she just doesn't have a clue how to act in front of a camera.
She's
pathetic.
Living embodiment of how far you can get with a durable pair of knee pads.
And look, she's pretty. So they thought, okay, she's a pretty woman. She's pretty and she's a woman of color. You know, she checks all the boxes and we'll throw her out there. But again,
she's not African American. She's Indian.
Oh my God, she's whatever. She's mixed or something. You know, they use woman of color now. That just means whatever I guess it means. But the bottom line is, if you look at it, man, you got Biden and Kamala over here. You got Liz Truss, Bojo, and these clowns. You got Schultz. You got, to me, when I look around, I'm the only one, God knows he's a Rothschild banker, but Macron seems like he's not a complete idiot. He is a neoliberal banker, but he's the only one that's not a complete bungling fool. And it's obvious that the powers that be now deliberately choose the stupidest person they can find so they can sit him out there, because otherwise, nobody else would do this. Somebody might question them and say, hey, do you think we ought to do this? They don't want anybody smart enough or competent enough to ever do that.
What do you think of Tulsi Gabbard?
You know, let me say this. 2016, I'll make this a quick story. 2016, I was covering the Democratic convention for Pacifica Network and Fox News. So I was there and I was constantly on Fox talking, you know, on the shows. Fox had a big tent there. And I remember talking to a couple people and they said, who do you like for 2020? And I said, Tulsi Gabbard. And when Tulsi Gabbard, when she just said she was going to, I was a big Tulsi fan. She said she was going to run. I jumped on a plane. That was like Thursday. I got on a plane and flew to Hawaii, God knows, 12 hours, so I could be there to see that. So, you know, that tells you I was a big Tulsi Gabbard fan. Mm-hmm. I'm not like I said, she's more conservative than me, which ain't hard to be more conservative than me if you know me. But I like her foreign policy stance. I like the fact that she lives in a practical reality. Mm-hmm. There are things about Tulsi I would disagree with, but would I vote for Tulsi over all of these clowns in a hot second? So she's more conservative than I am, but I think she's a reasonable person. I think she's honest. I think she means what she says. I think she actually believes in a practical foreign policy that's in the best interest, not only of the United States, but in the best interest of humanity. So I like, you know, there are a lot of things I like about Tulsi Gabbard.
Okay. Yeah, because she recently left the Democratic Party, and I'm wondering she's the kind of woman who strikes me as someone who doesn't make a move unless she's got a very clear plan, that she knows exactly what she's doing. And
Trump Gabbard 2024. Have you heard? I've heard that.
No, I think that that's a kind of crazy. I don't think Trump is going to run in 2024. I think that he's going to realize that he's just not up for it. I mean, his ego is huge, but he's going to be an older man.
Yeah,
I
he'll
mean,
be.
so I think that he might
I
say,
agree.
do I really need this hassle, or could I be a kingmaker? That would be a different story, and
Good
he would
point.
actually have a lot more power and a lot
Good
more
point.
fun being a
Yeah.
kingmaker than being the king.
And the CIA wouldn't rub him out like they certainly would if he tried to run. I mean, if we're honest about it, I think they'd run. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say that on YouTube. I just think he should watch his back if he decides to run. Let's say that.
Well, look, after the Nord Stream thing, where the Americans blew up that pipeline and everybody knows it, I mean, I wouldn't put it past these guys to do anything.
Can I show you a book that I'm reading?
Sure. Yeah. What's that? Move it a little bit there. Ally versus Ally, America and America, Europe, and the Siberian pipeline crisis. Oh, interesting. Interesting. Yeah.
Written by Anthony Blinken, 1987. This thing, let me read just a couple of passages that I
Sure.
highlighted from Anthony Blinken's 1987 book. For a number of influential policymakers, the time seemed opportune to engage the Soviet Union in a round of economic warfare, regardless of the price that might have to be paid by the economies of Western Europe and the American business community.
Jesus. Well, that shows you they've got a hard on for Russia that's going on 35 years.
This guy in 87 basically wrote a, like the old O.J. Simpson book, looking for the real killer. If I did it,
If I did it. Yeah.
This is like basically him writing, well, if I wanted to blow the pipeline up, this would definitely be, this would be my manifesto. It's really the manifesto of a madman, to be quite frank. But I'm in the process of reading it.
Oh, you're going to have to come back on and tell us about it. Give us a book report. Because I haven't read it myself. I'm assuming it must be online, and get a hold of it.
It's hard to find. And let me tell you, I've had to pay $64 for this stinking thing, and I'm hoping that Blinken doesn't get. Here's like one of the chapters, "Seeds of Discord," the pipeline embargo. You go in, and he's talking about basically the Europeans want this deal for pipelines with Russia because the Europeans feel that it's in their best interest. The U.S. doesn't want them to do it because of strategic issues. They don't care about the Europeans' economic interests. For strategic issues, they don't feel like that the Europeans should do it, which, let's face it, that's what it is today. So this guy, I mean, it's obvious they blew up the pipeline at this point.
Yeah. And anybody who denies it is ridiculous, is just, but Anyway, we've been going on for an hour.
Yeah, I better get ready to roll myself.
And you got to go. Yeah. But Garland, it was a real pleasure having you on. Chat, give Garland GN exclamation mark, to celebrate him having come on the show. Because
and if I may ask anybody there to follow my YouTube channel, I'm on regularly talking about all kinds of crazy stuff on YouTube.
Yes, I'm going to be putting on the link, and there's chat giving you their approval. And we will definitely put the link as soon as the broadcast is done. I'll update it so that people go to your YouTube channel. And where else can they find you? Or is YouTube really your central at this point?
Well, I'm on YouTube. I'm on Rockfin. And then I have a number of shows. I've got a radio show. It's on Sputnik, believe it or not, Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C. I've got a radio show on Pacifica, which is WPFW 89.3 FM in Washington, D.C. I have a radio show on KPFK 90.7 in Los Angeles, California, which is funny because the show I do in L.A., the guy who does the show after me hates my guts. He calls me a Russian propagandist stooge, and then he argues. It's just crazy. But KPFK says keep doing your show. So, and I just say stuff I believe. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's an excellent thing. Okay, so you go to his channel down below. That'll be there when I finish the recording. And Garland, stick around a little bit. I just want to say a couple of words to you in private. I'm going to show him some of my early pictures from my OnlyFans chat. It's been a real pleasure. I hope to have you on again soon. And
anytime.
Chat, I hope you enjoyed the show, and I will see you next time. Take it easy.